The conference room door rattled as executives shoved at it, panic flashing across their faces. Millions of dollars in contracts, sensitive data, and the company's reputation, all locked away behind a steel door that refused every keycard, every code. "We're finished," the CEO spat, turning her frustration toward the quiet janitor mopping the hall. "What would you know about this? You're just the janitor." But then the single dad set down his mop, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a worn brass key no one had ever seen before. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. The building buzzed with chaos. Phones rang unanswered. Managers barked orders into headsets, and security guards fumbled with override codes. The locked office was the heartbeat of the company, servers humming with client portfolios worth billions. No one could get in, and every passing second was a nail in the coffin. Standing at the edge of the storm was Daniel Hayes, a single dad in his late 30s. His uniform smelled faintly of disinfectant, his hands rough from scrubbing floors, night after night. He'd heard the insult before, just the janitor, but today the words cut deeper. "Move aside," barked the CFO, sweat soaking through his shirt. "This is above your pay grade." Daniel didn't flinch. He knelt at the heavy lock, studying it with a calm precision that startled everyone. Then he whispered almost to himself, "Not above mine." From his pocket came a key, old and unassuming. He slid it into the lock, turned it once, and with a heavy click, the impossible door swung open. The executives froze. The CEO, a sharp-tongued woman named Victoria Lane, blinked in disbelief. How did you—" Daniel simply shrugged. "Some doors don't open to power or money. They open to trust." But before the tension could break, a small voice echoed down the hall. "Daddy?" His 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, peeked around the corner, her pink backpack slipping off one shoulder. She'd come with him today because he couldn't afford childcare. Daniel's jaw tightened. He'd hoped no one would notice her. The CEO's gaze shifted to Sophie, and for the first time all day, her voice softened. "That's your daughter." Daniel nodded, his hand instinctively resting on Sophie's shoulder. He never begged for respect, but in that moment, standing in the open doorway that no one else could unlock, he'd earned it. The air inside the executive suite was cold and too clean. Glass, chrome, a whiteboard full of numbers that looked like they were bleeding red. A wall of monitors flashed warnings. Access denied. Cooling override. Client VPN offline. A countdown pulsed in the corner. 0:17:48. 17 minutes until our SLA penalties kick in, the COO muttered. Cheeks drained. Then the press, then lawsuits. Victoria Lane regained her edge. I want a manual recovery now." A cluster of techs swarmed a terminal. An older engineer with a clipped beard typed furiously and shook his head. "It's not just the door. Someone forced a lockout at the rack controllers. It's like a digital chokehold." Daniel guided Sophie to a chair near the window. "Draw me something brave, Bug," he whispered. She nodded, pulled out a dull pencil, and began tracing a tiny knight with a paper shield. A junior IT intern hovered near the door, eyes glossy. I think I caused the first alert," she confessed, voice barely above a whisper. "My name's Mia. I plugged in a diagnostic drive and it—" She swallowed. "It froze. I pulled it out, but I think that's when the lockouts cascaded." A murmur turned to a low growl. The COO threw up his hands. "You what?" Daniel stepped between Mia and the storm. "She said diagnostic, not malicious. Blaming a rookie won't get your servers breathing." Victoria's gaze sharpened. "And you know that because—" Daniel's eyes flicked to the rack closet window, layered steel mesh over glass, and then to the floor where dust told a story no one else had read. There were fresh boot prints inside the mesh perimeter. He could see the faint smudge where someone had propped the panel with a knee, and the screws, one Phillips, one Torx, were swapped, the kind of sloppy haste done when a person wants in, not out. "I know because whoever did this was in a hurry," Daniel said quietly, "and because this building still remembers who designed it." He crossed to the mechanical panel on the far wall, old metal painted over too many times. He tapped the casing. It rang with a hollow note. He ran a finger under the lip, found what he was looking for, and popped the plate loose to reveal a tiny brass cylinder no one had noticed in years. "What is that?" the COO asked. "An analog interlock," Daniel said. "Back when Arthur Bell still ran this place, he told me there should always be a way to open a door when the computers forget people run them." The founder's name made the room go still. Sometimes old bones save new bodies. He pulled out the same worn key, slid it into the brass, and turned. Another soft click. The red warnings on 2 monitors flickered to amber. Cooling priority rolled back from override to manual. Fans deep in the building spun up like a faraway storm deciding to be rain. Mia exhaled. "We've got partial systems. The racks can breathe." "Great!" the COO snapped. "But the door was only the first problem," Daniel nodded. "The second problem is whoever wants you locked out." He walked to the server closet. Through the mesh, a faint blue LED blinked, not in rhythm with the rack lights. An out-of-band device. He crouched, peered through, and followed the cable snake to a tiny, non-company dongle wedged behind a power strip. "That little thing is whispering to your network while you scream," he said. "You can't kick it out from here because it's bypassing your controls." The beard-trimmed engineer squinted. "How did we miss that?" "Because no one looks where the cleaning staff looks," Daniel said, and no one met his eyes. Victoria stepped closer, voice low. "How do we fix it?" Daniel turned to Mia. "You said you plugged a diagnostic drive in?" She nodded, mortified. "To a front USB port. We keep kits. Mine's basic, just a boot utility and a watcher script." "Good, you and I will run an analog boot. We'll starve the parasite, but we'll need to trip the sub-basement breaker interlock and isolate that port. And we need to do it in under—" He glanced at the countdown. 16 minutes, the COO scoffed. "You're taking direction from a Jan—" Victoria raised a palm, silencing him. "If he can buy us seconds, I'll take hours." Sophie slid off the chair, marched up to Victoria, and handed her a crumpled strawberry Band-Aid from her backpack. "For when words hurt," she said simply. Victoria blinked fast, then took it with a stiff nod. "Thank you." "Sophie," Daniel's mouth twitched, just a fraction of a smile. "Mia, you're with me." "Where's security?" A guard, Martinez, jogged in. "Here. Good. We'll need the sub-basement room." "Your badge and mine." Daniel patted his chest pocket. "Yes, I keep one." The overnight crew opens stuck stairwells when badge readers glitch. "We carry the building when it falls asleep." They moved. The stairwell air smelled like old dust and warm metal. Mia's hands shook around the handle of her kit. "I thought I ruined everything," she said. "You told the truth when it would have been easier to disappear," Daniel replied. "You didn't ruin anything. You gave us a map. Why are you nice?" she asked, surprising herself. He paused on the landing. "Because a long time ago, someone was nice to me in this very building." They reached the sub-basement, concrete walls sweating, a maze of pipes like steel arteries. Martinez scanned his badge. The door buzzed. Inside, an ancient breaker cabinet loomed. Daniel checked labels. Rack, Cutter Lakes, Mesh Power, Ubi there. Out of band. He pulled a red-handled insulated wrench from his janitor's cart. Nobody had questioned why he'd brought it. "When I throw this, our saboteur loses their ladder," he said. "We'll still have to get in the closet up there to yank the slug." "Slug?" Mia echoed. "That blue blink dongle that thinks it's clever." He took a breath and looked at Martinez. "On my mark, call upstairs and tell them to hold their breath for 2 seconds. He flipped the breaker with a decisive thunk. Upstairs, alarms burped, then steadied. The amber light went green on 2 monitors. The out-of-band pathway went blind. They sprinted back up the stairs, shoes drumming out a nervous rhythm. In the suite, the whiteboard now wore new numbers. Someone had recalculated penalties like a gambler counting chips. The company wasn't safe, but it wasn't dying. "Closet," Daniel said. The older engineer fumbled with mesh keys. Daniel gently stepped in and took over, hands moving like he was reading Braille. He swung the mesh open, reached behind the strip, and plucked out the parasite, a cheap-looking device with a shaved serial. He set it on the table like a dead wasp. Mia pulled on gloves and bagged it. "Chain of custody," she murmured, cheeks still damp but eyes focused. Victoria turned to Daniel. "How did you know any of this was here?" He glanced at the ceiling, as if the building itself were listening. "Mr. Bell used to call me at 2 a.m. to walk the floors with him. Said a company gets noisy when it forgets who cleans up. He showed me everything, mechanicals, retrofits, where the old bones creak. One night, we found his wife on the wrong side of a locked fire door during a drill. I pried it open with a mop handle. He put this key in my palm the next morning. 'For when the computers forget people,' he said. 'Use it only when kindness needs a door.'" Silence pressed in. The COO cleared his throat, chastened. "We, still have 18 client tunnels down." Mia wiped her nose with her sleeve, then straightened. "I can rebuild the tunnels if we soft reseed the certificates. But we'll need an executive authorization to roll the old failover protocol. It was archived 2 years ago." She looked at Daniel. "Can we?" Daniel's gaze slid to the corner file cabinet with a hairline crack of light. He walked over, knelt and tugged. Stuck, he tried again. It didn't move. Sophie padded up beside him. "Dad?" "You always told me every stuck thing has a nice way to be asked." He smiled, slid the bottom drawer left a hair, then pulled the top right. The cabinet sighed open, revealing a thin, dust-sleeved binder stamped with a fading logo, Bell House, Falcon Failover. Tucked inside was a sealed envelope with a trembling scrawl. "If the lights go out." D.H. Victoria's fingers hovered. "D.H.?" Daniel stared at the envelope like it was a photograph of a younger man. "Daniel Hayes," he said softly. The room inhaled. He broke the seal. Inside lay a single sheet, authorization. "In the event that system control fails and a human chooses care over convenience, I delegate emergency failover to the person holding the analog key. Move fast, be kind, and leave the door better than you found it." A.B. Victoria's voice was barely a thread. "Is this legal?" The older engineer was already skimming the binder. "It is, if the board ratified it. And they did, the day after the drill. I forgot this existed." He looked at Daniel, all replacing skepticism. "We can bring the tunnels back if he signs." All eyes turned to Daniel. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He thought of night shifts and birthday cupcakes eaten at sunrise in a break room that smelled like lemons, of Sophie sleeping on a folded hoodie while he wiped coffee rings from a table where men shouted numbers. He thought of the intern who told the truth even when fear could have made her small. "I'll sign," he said, "on 2 conditions." His voice was calm, steady. "A childcare stipend for custodial staff with kids under 12. And Mia gets a mentor and a real title by Friday. Associate Systems Engineer, not intern." She owned her mistake and stayed to fix it. "That's worth more than a dozen resumes." The COO opened his mouth. Victoria's gaze snapped to him, then back to Daniel. "Done," she said. No wobble. Daniel scrawled his name on the line marked Emergency Custodian. Mia moved to the terminal, hands sure now. Falcon Protocol. Receding certs. "Wait," she frowned. "Someone's still trying to push commands from the inside. The parasite is out, but there's an active session piggybacking through a tablet on the guest network. Can you trace it?" Victoria asked. Mia's jaw set. "Already did." She pointed to the corner where a slick leather folio lay open beside a cooling latte. On the tablet's lock screen, a name glowed, Leonard Pike. The CFO, Leonard, froze. His smile was a mistake that came too late. "This is outrageous," he barked, stepping backward. "My device was compromised." The door behind him clicked shut of its own weight. From her chair by the window, Sophie lifted her drawing. The tiny knight had a key instead of a sword. "Daddy?" she said, voice small but clear. "The brave thing isn't loud. It's steady, right?" Daniel set the binder down and faced Leonard, eyes calm as winter glass. "Steady," he agreed. "And very, very hard." Mia hit enter. The monitors flashed. Falcon failover active. Tunnels began to reappear, one after another like lights popping on down a long, dark street. But the room didn't exhale yet, because the man who'd called him just the janitor wasn't the danger anymore. The danger was the man who'd smiled at him every night and never once said thank you. And he was standing 3 feet from the exit. "Martinez," Victoria said, voice cool steel. "Nobody leaves." Leonard's eyes darted to the parasite bagged on the table, to the binder, to Daniel's quiet face. He took 1 step toward the door and found Daniel already there, not blocking, just present. "I'm not here to punish you," Daniel said softly. "I'm here to keep this building standing," Leonard scoffed, but his laugh was thin. "You think you're a hero?" Daniel shook his head. "I think I'm the man with the mop who knew which door to open." Behind them, the final tunnel blinked green. The countdown timer stopped at 00:02:09, and in the hum right after the crisis faded, but before the reckoning began, Victoria turned to Daniel with something new in her eyes. Respect with a thread of shame sewn through. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "if you'll stay, you're not leaving this room as a janitor." The steady thing in Daniel did not waver. "I'll stay until this is safe," he said. "Then we'll talk about what doors should never have been shut." The blinds rattled, just a breath of wind from the cooling finally catching up. Somewhere deep in the building, old bones stopped creaking, and at the window, a little girl with a paper knight colored the shield sky blue. The suite still buzzed with tension. The parasite was gone, the systems were stabilizing, but the betrayal stung worse than the countdown ever had. Leonard Pike, the CFO who had shaken hands, shared holiday toasts, and signed off on Daniel's overtime slips, was now cornered, his device bagged. His excuses thinning. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Victoria's voice carried hard and steady. "This company trusted you with its lifeblood." Leonard's eyes darted to Daniel. "Don't look at me like that," he snapped. "You think this janitor is some savior? He's nothing without that key. Nothing!" Daniel didn't rise to it. He simply stood there, the weight of years of ignored nights heavy on his shoulders. He'd scrubbed away other people's mistakes for over a decade. Tonight he had done the same, but not with a mop. Mia glanced between them, her small voice breaking through. "He's the only reason we're not headlines tomorrow." Silence. The kind of silence that makes everyone realize where the truth sits. Victoria crossed her arms, her eyes locked on Leonard. "Martinez, escort him out. He's finished." The guard stepped forward, gripping Leonard's arm. For the first time, panic cracked Leonard's face. "Victoria, think. You need me. You'll drown without me." "No," she said firmly, her gaze sliding to Daniel. "We'll stand without you," the room exhaled. The parasite was out, the saboteur exposed, and the system alive again. But the real shift wasn't in the servers or the contracts. It was in the way every executive now looked at the man who had once been invisible. When the dust settled, Sophie tugged on Daniel's sleeve. "Daddy, are you in trouble?" Daniel crouched, so his eyes were level with hers. "No, Bug. Not this time." Victoria knelt beside them, uncharacteristically gentle. "Sophie, your dad just saved every person in this building. That's not trouble. That's courage." The little girl studied her father with wide eyes, as if seeing him new. Then she grinned and hugged him fiercely. For Daniel, that hug was heavier than applause, richer than any paycheck. It was proof that the steady things, integrity, kindness, persistence, could still cut through the noise. The following morning, the company held an emergency board meeting. Daniel wasn't supposed to be there, but Victoria made sure he was, sitting at the long oak table, Sophie beside him with her sketchbook open. The board argued numbers, liability, and image. But when Victoria slid the binder across the polished wood, her voice broke the debate like glass. "Last night, when our systems failed, the only person who held the legal authority to save us was not a C-suite. It was the janitor." Gasps, murmurs, but she pressed on. "That's not just a quirk of Arthur Bell's policies. That's a truth we've forgotten. The foundation of a company isn't only built on those who sit at this table. It's built on those who show up when the lights go out." Daniel listened, jaw set, not basking in the attention. He had work to do, floors to mop, a daughter to raise. He didn't crave titles. But when the vote came, and Victoria proposed a new role, Director of Operations Integrity, there was no dissent. Daniel turned it down at first. "I'm not here for a title," he said. I just want enough to take care of Sophie, and for people like Mia to get a fair shot. But Sophie tugged his sleeve again. Daddy, maybe it's time you used your key for something bigger. He looked at her, then at Victoria, then at Mia, who nodded with quiet hope. Finally he said, I'll accept on one condition. We build a culture where no one is ever just anything again. Victoria extended her hand. Agreed. Daniel shook it, his grip steady, his eyes unwavering. That evening, as the sun sank behind the skyline, Daniel pushed Sophie's swing at the park. She laughed, her backpack bouncing, her drawing of the night fluttering in her pocket. To her, he wasn't a janitor or a director or a hero. He was Dad, the man who unlocked doors not just with keys, but with kindness, grit, and the courage to stand steady when the whole world shook. And for the first time in years, Daniel let himself laugh too, loud, free, and unafraid of who heard, because sometimes the doors that matter most aren't steel or glass. They're the ones inside people, the ones that only open when someone believes enough to try.